Welcome to the 27th edition of Botcasters with Stephan, Alberth from Aisha. Welcome, Stephan.
Hi there. Pleasure to be here. Thanks, John.
Oh, thank you for being here. And today we're going to talk about digital humans. It's a bit of a contradiction, but you will take us along in this journey. And please introduce yourself first.
Okay. Well, so Stephan Alberth, I've been in the field of digital humans probably not as long as many people here, at least in the world of chatbots. I've been in the space for about a year. I actually have a background in Strathouse Consulting, so I was with McKinsey and then Partners in Performance, so sort of top-down strategy, bottom-up strategy and implementation, and then spent a number of years implementing transformation programs in ABB. And when I decided to do something on my own, my actual goal was to go out there and create a digital consultant, because I saw, digital consulting is such an expensive space, and many organizations simply can't afford that. And I wanted to create a digital consultant, and I knew for that to be successful, I needed a way to really connect to people. So there are certain aspects of consulting which is easier to replicate digitally than others. So be focusing on those areas, but I still needed a way to touch and communicate emotionally with people. And I looked out and I tried to find something which I thought would do that for me, and I literally didn't find anything that sort of met the criteria I was looking for, and so I went out and created, and that's how I ended up with Aisha.
And tell us a little bit more about Aisha, because a digital consultant, that sort of triggers me.
Mm-hmm. So Aisha, as a sort of a pure technology focus, so we're not focusing on the use cases of a consultant yet. It's really just the underlying technology that basically turns a chatbot into a chatbot with a face and a personality, something that is more relatable. And rather than using more, let's say, cartoon-style 3D animation, I really wanted to go for something which is photorealistic. Some people call them deep fakes. There's quite a few companies out there that are starting to develop this technology to create videos based on this deepfake technology, but there was nothing out there to actually turn that into a really user-friendly chatbot type interface. And so I've been working on creating that interface that basically brings together the best of the deepfake style avatars, or deepfake for good, if you will, and high-quality chatbot technology in the back end.
And are you building this yourself, or you have partners? How are you doing this?
So the company Aisha is building that. We're working with partner organizations. I have a development team in India and a development team in Serbia. And together we're developing both the front end, the interconnectivity, the APIs to the various parties, and of course building the chatbot technology in the back end.
You're building proprietary chatbot technology, or are you using existing frameworks?
Not. Yes. My absolute goal here is to leverage all of these great technologies that are out there. It certainly wouldn't make sense for a startup, I think, these days to build their own chatbot technology. It's a very big field. It's really well developed. There's a lot of great technology out there. So our goal is to connect into that best-in-class technology, or technologies, making it as flexible as possible, and basically bringing that sort of one-stop shop to users, to customers, so that they can actually create their own experiences, or we can help them create those experiences.
So basically, in due time, when you're on the market, your customers will be able to do everything, or their conversation designers will be able to do everything themselves. That's
absolutely. Yep, we're launching in probably in 2 stages. This month we're already launching, and we've already got the first customer on board. And we're growing. Yeah, thank you. That was a big step for a startup. We've got ABB on board this month, and we're developing a proof of concept with them. And over the next couple of months, we should have also not only a number of other early adopters, where we'll be working closely with them to create the experiences, but also the self-service platform.
For your customers?
For customers to be able to create their own digital human experiences. Exactly.
So that's a lot happening at the same time. So now, thank you for this introduction. And I'm wondering, because we don't see many, we can call them digital humans, but it's a bit confusing. So basically it's chatbots with a face, or with a human-like face. What drove you, or what scientific data, if there was any research done, drove you to say, okay, a regular chatbot is not good or not good enough? We need like a human-like interaction in order to create a better user experience, because I assume that's what it's all about.
Yeah. There is a small but growing amount of research in this area. I'm actually working with a PhD graduate who just graduated this year from university here in Switzerland, who was looking at the benefits of moving from a pure chat-focused or text-focused chatbot to a voice bot, and also then did the research of going from voice to an avatar-based. Even though, let's say, the sort of photorealistic avatars are not really yet out in the market, so it's a bit hard to have any research there yet. And we're actually currently in discussions to create a research project to look at those next level of developments. The big step that you see typically going from, let's say, text to voice, and then gets exaggerated based on most research that is out there once you go from then voice to an avatar, is essentially this flow-like state. So people become more captivated, they get more engaged in the conversation. Perhaps it takes them a little bit out of their own head and a bit more into that conversation. There is some evidence, for example, out there that people would purchase more luxurious items because they got engaged in this flow-like state, rather than, if they were just doing a text, which is maybe more their sort of logical brain in action. And really surprisingly, which blew me away when I first read about this, there's also been a bunch of research in medical and mental health space, and people trust a digital human more than they trust a real doctor. Perhaps they feel like it's a non-judgmental space. Maybe they feel like they're not going to go home and tell their wives about it in the evening, and they don't want to be talked about. It's hard to say why, but people were sharing more information with a digital human than they were with the real living and breathing one. There's a few ideas there.
But that's if you think about it, that's a good and a bad thing. Because a good thing, because you can use digital humans or chatbots to prepare for medical consultations or other maybe difficult talks, and get more information, and then maybe a better talk after that. But the scary part is, what if, because of that, they don't trust the doctor or their financial advisor or whoever? They don't trust them anymore. So what happens to? I'm not saying the jobs are going to disappear, but what's going to happen? Because it could be with AI, and that's based on human knowledge anyway. So what's going to happen here? I mean, how is this going to change our society? I mean, of course we've seen this in movies, science fiction movies, and a lot of the things we've seen in movies is happening. So how do you see this moving?
Probably slower than what we imagine when we all look out and we see ChatGPT is changing the world. And yes, it was quite a big step once they launched and it was open access. But the GPT series of technology has actually been out there for a while. And when we look at ChatGPT today, I think every organization has now realized that we've come past a certain point, but it didn't happen overnight. It took a long time. But now it's become close enough that it's exciting and interesting. Yet at the same time, I don't know how many organizations out there are going to be willing to say, okay, let's plug in ChatGPT to our customers, because they don't know if they're going to say things that are completely wrong or inappropriate. So I still think we probably have a couple of years until we get to the stage where that sort of generative AI, which creates the text out of its own digital brain, is going to be the central theme. I'm sure it will happen, and there's going to be a lot of effort and work that's going to happen until we get there. And that's going to take a lot of jobs, create a lot of jobs and a lot of effort to get to that point. It's not going to happen overnight.
But a question about generative AI, because everybody calls it generative AI, but isn't it actually regenerative AI? Because it's not creating anything new; it's just combining things that are already out there. It already learned. It's not creating new stuff.
I mean,
I'm challenging
that's
you.
A great challenge. I remember there was this movie, and it was talking about some kind of technology that was put together in a certain way. I think it goes back to the windscreen wipers in cars when somebody finally managed to design the perfect windscreen wiper technology, and the guy was in court, and this is, well, here's a book. Is this new? Does this belong to someone, or does it already exist? Because every single word in this book is a known word, and they're all made out of letters of the alphabet, which are all known. So at the end of the day, you didn't create anything. This book by somebody famous, Hemingway, whatever, is actually a copy. It's not unique. I think with generative AI, we're going to be able to rapidly develop so much more variability and flexibility and expansive knowledge that feeds it, to the point that we'll get things which are even more generative than what a human does, as a human is actually also reflecting what they've learned and seen in their very reduced life experience, compared to, let's say, an AI that can tap into literally millions or billions of people's lives and learnings and languages.
Yeah, this is interesting, because in the previous recording of the podcast, number 26, I talked to a researcher in the medical field, in the healthcare field, from Canada, University of Alberta, and we had information or an article where there was a study done in healthcare that stating that AI was in 87% of the cases, it had amongst the top 3 the right diagnosis, and doctors were at 84%. So the computing power, the sheer computing power, and the amount of data it can look at or compare with, that's astonishing. I think that's where the generative or regenerative power will be coming from. And it might inspire people to do different things. Although what I saw, the research that's being done on personalized medicine, looking into DNA and structures of medication, that's actually quite interesting, because it's basically running simulations. So that's computing power and a model. But so I think you're right. It will happen, and in some fields a little bit faster. But having a meaningful conversation is actually quite difficult. And that's why you took a different turn in your thinking and you're building your product, right?
Yeah. So when I was thinking about how to build this, we sort of have the 2 key ways that were possible. It was going down the generative route, where you can have lots and lots of flexibility. You can have any type of response, and you can turn that into some kind of a avatar. But it obviously has to react super quickly. Or we can focus on the more traditional, still AI-enabled, intent-based chatbot models, where you can have, you can build out quite a broad and semi-exhaustive set of solutions, but of course everything has to be predefined according to the needs of the creator of that chatbot. And you then have this dilemma: do you want lots of flexibility, but in the end you're going to have a bad quality avatar, or would you rather have less flexibility but then getting these sort of photorealistic deep fake type connections? And I went down the other route. There are a lot of other solutions out there that are really focusing on that sort of 3D animated avatar technology and connecting them to chatbots. But based on my needs, when I was thinking about the consultant, the digital consultant, and when I was thinking of companies such as ABB, where I previously worked, there wasn't a high, a lot of risk appetite generally. So I couldn't imagine the comms department signing off and having a chatbot representing the company, or a digital human representing the company, where you didn't know exactly what it was going to say. So I think we've still got, talking about the speed of this generative AI, so I think we still have 2 or 3 years until large organizations are going to be willing to trust that the guardrails are in place to be able to have a generative AI that is really representing the organization in the right way.
I think those guardrails are actually an important point you're making, because whatever we see coming out of ChatGPT or models, similar models, they need to be curated. What I was wondering, what application is ABB, if you would like to share, going to use this for? Is it going to be externally or internally?
Mm-hmm. So the first use case that we're looking at is an internal use case. I'd rather not go into more details just yet. We're gonna implement the POC and then look at rolling it out, and at that point would be happy to share a joint statement on that. I'm quite excited to do that, but for now I'll just leave it at that.
No, I can understand that, but I was just interested that they're starting the safe way internally. That if something goes wrong, which is it's possible if you implement new technology, that is what happens. You run into stuff you didn't predict. So that's actually, I think that's strategically a good choice to start that way and have people test it internally. One question, if you can reveal that, are they using it for HR type of things or general internal use, like internal communication?
So the use is definitely around communicating to their internal people. So it's definitely for managing the human resource within the organization, and also in the area of, let's say, coaching and training.
That's really cool. And if you look at the people that are involved, the type of people, I don't need names or something, but is that the communication department in the lead or a tech department? Who's in the lead? Or do they have their conversation design?
Yeah, so
people?
I mean, I think what's really important for any of these projects, especially when things are not quite as standard as, let's say, your typical chatbot, and it requires a lot of understanding of what the very specific goal is, and how does that represent, from a the human perspective, from the the visual, the audio, and so on. That you have really the business or the functional owner. So it's being managed from the functional leadership in the specific function that I'm working with, and it's then being coordinated together with, let's say, the critical partners, whether it's the legal, data protection, and IT security.
And do you envision a digital human or a chatbot with a face? Do you envision that going fully data-driven, so that person or avatar or however you want to call it actually has a conversation with you based on your own data? So I'm looking a bit further ahead. Let's say you would forget ABB. It's not about ABB. But if you would use it, for instance, for an insurance company or a healthcare company or organization or anything that would make it personalized, do you envision that?
I mean, this is sort of a general, let's say, chatbot conversational AI question, not specific to the digital human additional piece to it. Let's say the face, the personality, but can be augmented there as well. So I think it's going to be natural that as the back end technology progresses, people will be wanting more services, and they'll be willing to give up some elements of, let's say, privacy to trusted partners, or as we do today with Facebook, as we do today with our iPhone, and so on, to get a much better response, to get something which is specific to you. And I think the one area that we're going to see with something, really with something like a digital human, really add value is elements such as, say, emotion AI. Whether it's based on having a face-to-face conversation where the AI can understand whether you've maybe fully understood, or whether you have some question marks, or whether you're positive or negative, and then based on that to be able to, let's say, respond effectively. You don't want this great happy chatbot or digital human sort of saying, "Oh, you just smashed your car. Great. So please send us the forms and we'll get back to you." We need to be able to start having more intelligent and more emotionally intelligent conversations with technology. Otherwise, it's going to feel really awkward, and we don't want to have a neutral conversation, everything being the same. And so I think the next step, certainly for me and for other providers out there, will be to add a much more emotional response. I think we're already seeing this on the more, let's say, cartoon-based graphics-based avatars, but then to bring it into these types of photorealistic is going to be, let's say, one step more of complexity, but will add, I think, a lot more value, where you can start to have more of a meaningful conversation where they understand your words, but they also understand your base emotion as well, and can respond more effectively.
Yeah, I was thinking about, there was this whole thing in Holland about lonely elderly people, and then they have this healthcare robot, literally a robot that with a screen on it that sort of interacts with it was an experiment with these people to make them sort of less lonely. But I would imagine you could do that on your phone or on other devices as well, and have a meaningful conversation. And the other thing I thought, I think there's already an AI application doing that, where you can have a few bits of a voice of someone, basically maybe a person who's sick or who is going to die, and an image of that person, and basically have a conversation with that person, although the person isn't around anymore. And I can imagine that could have a tremendous value, like people looking back on a video of a marriage or something, say, oh, we looked so happy, blah, 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 and then, but the person isn't there anymore. And then having a conversation, having someone who is not alive anymore congratulate a grandchild, for instance, like it was recorded, way before. I imagine you get all these type of actually emotionally heavy or applications of this technology.
I mean, yeah, as we start heading into generative AI of all of these, whether it's the visual, whether it's the voice, recreating the voice, whether it's recreating the whole background, or all of these elements start to bring in a whole new world of opportunities. I'm happy to be focusing on just one relatively small area in that, but if you look at the broader capabilities, and also what can also be then actually integrated into experiences, into solutions, it's super exciting. There's nothing else to say. There's lots of great use cases out there.
And if you look at, you have a lot of experience on the strategy front from your McKinsey time, and after that. And you look at the strategic implications, actually what happens before you make the choice of, well, either a chatbot or an application like yours. What happens on sea level? Because there must be some. It's a complicated process, I presume, to get to cut through the chase, but to get to the point where they actually say, hey, this is a good idea, let's try this. And I know ABB knew you worked there, so they trust you, I presume. But if you zoom out, how does that work, in your opinion?
So let me just take a sort of step back, not reflecting on my own sort of experience right now and here. If you're doing a strategy, everything comes down to really cost and benefit and ease of implementation. And if you look at the cost or the risks, costs and risks, if you will, there's this risk-return ratio that you need to look at, or the cost-return ratio, and then there's the sort of what else could go wrong. I think with chatbots generally, we're in a space where we have some excellent chatbots even pure text chatbots that really sort of tick the box. They do what they're intended to do. You have great conversations. You get the result you want. Everyone's happy. There's also a lot of less awesome chatbots out there that we all know and love or despise. And a lot of that really comes down to sort of the conversation design. I've had a lot of fun taking part in the Conversation Design Institute trainings on how to create good conversational design, end to end, and it really is a science to do it really well and takes lots of experience. And if you look at many of the chatbots out there, clearly that hasn't been brought to bear. But if you look at then the benefits, I think the benefit calculation is something that is rather simple. People will say, okay, well, we can have a human answering the call. You have 100 people in some location or spread out. They cost you maybe somewhere between $30 and $100 an hour or whatever, depending on the industry you're in and the expertise required. And they do 10 calls an hour, so it costs you X dollars, $3 to $10 or whatever per call to answer. And then they try and see, well, how many of these calls can we get rid of? Can we satisfy 60% by serving them with a chatbot? If it's incoming calls, and if they can, then what will be the cost to do that? I think sometimes the user experience is not fully taken into account. Especially when you see, in many cases, the type of chatbot that's then created, not going to the sort of higher echelons of what's possible.
Yeah, what you're talking about is FAQ bots that don't answer the questions, that don't understand the intents and also. I agree, but what happens on I understand that it's a cost-benefit calculation. But there's more to it. I think if you look at having a conversation with someone, especially if you're a sales-driven organization, what is overlooked right now, in my opinion, is the crossover between having a conversation and going into a transaction, where a transaction doesn't necessarily mean a commercial transaction, could be an administrative transaction, changing something or whatever, or your address. And I think that's sort of looked over. That's why I find your tech development so interesting. Because if you trust a human-like chatbot more than a text-based chatbot, what could happen in the transactional department where you talk to someone and say, "Hey, could you change my address?" And it's psychologically, it's like the same as being on the phone or a video call with someone. And that person, that avatar, takes care of it for you. I can imagine that lowers a threshold to go from a conversation to a transaction. What's your view?
Yeah, the user experience is obviously critical here. And if you care about the user experience and you want to share your brand and your values to your customer, and, maybe if you're selling a $2 item and they need to basically put in a code, whatever, then you don't really care about that. It's just sort of, factory delivery. But if you have, any kind of situation where you care about that emotional connection and that brand and the values that you're trying to share, obviously that's much easier to do when you have a person and a background and a voice that all come together in a single package.
And are you going to test what you're doing against a text-based bot? Because I'm really curious. If you talk about user experience, what's your
absolutely. As I mentioned, I think at the very beginning, I'm trying to kick off in the next weeks, hopefully, the first part of a research with the University of St. Gallen here in Switzerland, where we're going to be looking at, multiple elements, but two of the critical ones are how effective is it going from text to voice to avatar, and also what drives a good conversation with an avatar. If we go back to what drives a good conversation with text, there's a bunch of rules and suggestions, etc., about that, and I think it's quite well understood. And of course, if you follow those rules, you say, you don't have the same chatbot if it's a text, if you have to, if it's a voice-based conversation, sorry, because, you have to listen and you have to exchange, and it's all a little bit different. So you change the way you design those conversations. How is it different than with a video chatbot? And I think there's still a lot of unknowns that need to be researched and understood better, so that we can actually not just create a video conversation that is like let's say a voice conversation, but actually create something which is really different and even better.
And you mean then better and different as in closer to a human-to-human conversation? Is that what you mean?
There's that element. If you look at, let's say, the literature for chatbots, the goal is not to have the same conversation as you would with a human, but is to most effectively deliver the needs of the user. And if that means, in some cases, that it's more like a human-to-human connection, that's great. Maybe it helps with the emotional piece, but there are going to be limitations in that connection, and also the limitation that people know, or should know at least, that it's not a real human, and therefore they may want or expect something slightly different. So I guess it's meeting people where they are at and giving them the best experience possible in their situation.
I can imagine that that research, you need to test different things, or have different age groups. That could also make a big difference. I'm not sure if you're targeting any specific age group on the consumer side, but I can imagine that older people find it more appealing than younger people, because it's more lifelike conversation. If if the bot actually understands you, because that's also a problem. If it doesn't repeat what you're saying, or it doesn't understand correctly, people get annoyed. So there's another problem. I think what you did sort of for now solves it. But I would be highly interested if you at some point have the research and can share it, please come back on the show and share it with us. So I think that's could be quite impactful. I haven't seen any study so far comparing meaningful conversations of an avatar with a text-based bot or a voice-based bot. But that's my thing. Stephan, we discussed this before. I'm really curious. You said you could show in 2 minutes what your application does, and it's not about a sales page. But I'm really curious, and I think people should see what we're talking about.
Let me see.
Can you?
This is pretty easy tech. Just guess I can just click on share.
But sometimes it doesn't work. We know that.
All right. Is that working for you?
I see a lady who blinks, and it says start voice conversation, start text conversation.
So yeah, this is the user side of the interface, where basically you can, where users either they need to be signed in or have open access, will be able to have a conversation. Just you have a few icons around. So this one basically can tell you what your exact speed is. So if you have good enough internet to have, let's say, a voice conversation versus a text conversation. If there are any specific messages from Asia which would be written in text, they would just sort of pop up here, and you can go back to them. You can always turn off the sound on and off. Ask her to repeat what you would like. You can turn the microphone on and off as needed. And if she's speaking, or she's speaking too much, and you're in a rush, you can basically ask her to be quiet, and you can interrupt the conversation. Always handy. So
I think a lot of people would like that at home, right?
No comment.
Very wise. This stays on the internet.
Hey there, I'm Aisha, your digital human, and I'd love to answer any questions you have about me and the exciting world of
hi there,
digital
Aisha.
humans.
How are you doing today? Okay, that's
Living the
great.
dream.
Before we get going, can you tell me what your name means?
My name is Aisha. That's spelt A-I-X-A. The name means she lives or she prospers.
Can you tell me more about digital humans?
Digital humans, such as me, are computer-generated representations of a real human being. They are created using a variety of digital techniques, including 3D modeling, animation, and artificial intelligence. The goal is to create a digital version of a human that is so realistic that it is indistinguishable from a real person. This technology is only now starting to show its true potential that will revolutionize the way we interact with digital content and technology. It can be
Good
used
example,
in
you may
various
want to say,
fields,
okay,
such as
that's
entertainment.
enough. Thank you.
She was on a roll.
In that case,
How-
can I help you with anything else?
The good thing is she's not insulting.
How do you
No problem.
create value for customers?
At the highest level, you can say digital humans create value by automating human tasks while still maintaining that emotional connection. But it really depends on the specific use case. For example, the answer will be very different if you are building a sales or branding experience versus something for educational or internal people development purposes. Would you like to go into detail in one specific area? Digital humans can add value to healthcare services by enabling accessibility for people in remote or underserved areas, by providing support in multiple languages, as well as by offering training and education for healthcare professionals. This can have numerous benefits for healthcare organizations beyond the obvious cost and time efficiencies. Would you like
So
me to
there, I'll
go
leave
into
it at
more
that.
detail?
I don't want to bore you guys, but that's just like a 1 or 2 minute interview, introduction or interview, should we say, with Aisha.
So, okay, let's go back to this. Did you put all the content behind it, or did you write all the texts yourself, or someone wrote them for you, or does it generate its own?
So
answers?
in that sense, the back end is more of a traditional chatbot. We use the Microsoft chatbot services here, and I created most of the text. I actually wanted to have a lot of variability, so I don't want people to always get the same answer. So I actually used ChatGPT to create variants of the conversation. So kind of decided what I wanted, and then got ChatGPT to create variants, checked them all, and then included that all in the conversation. I actually got a little bit sneaky. I knew I needed quite a big Q&A basis, so I basically literally said, "Hey, ChatGPT, what are the 20 most relevant questions you would ask a digital human startup before purchasing one?" And it created 20 excellent questions. And then I said, "Great, can you please answer them for me?" And then it created answers. I was like, "Okay, great, can you please create 3 variations of these?" And obviously I had to go through and make it all very specific to Aisha, but the speed at which I was able to build that was incredible. So very helpful.
So basically, ChatGPT did a lot of work for you, but you curated
absolutely. I
whatever
think that's
came
the
out.
biggest difference with the type of solution that I've focused on, which is this curated solution rather than a generative solution. I don't know any organization. People for fun would like to have the non-curated creative stuff, but I don't know at least many organizations that are willing to go at this current point in time with an uncurated solution. And not only that, if you want a good experience, you also need to have super high quality voice. The voice is really important, and we all know that text to voice is really quite good these days, but is far from perfect. And
So how do you manage that?
quite simply, we connect into the chatbot. We do a pull, a download of all of the utterances said by the chatbot, and we have a very rapid process where you can test all the sound, confirm what you want, and then you just generate all the videos and upload it, and it basically is pre-recorded but ready to go. And of course, by being pre-recorded, it means you don't have to recreate that generative avatar each time. And we all know how expensive, generative AI technology still can be.
So basically, every path in that what you showed us has been created already. So basically, it's like a decision tree. It goes in wherever you go. Oh, if you want that, or you ask that voice to text. Basically, you speak to the avatar. You say, "I want to go left," and then it will find the left in the database.
No, it's not that simplistic either. If you go in the world of chatbots, at least from my understanding, there's these, let's say, 3 key levels that we're seeing today. The tree-based structure, where everything comes down step by step. On the one extreme, you have the generative AI on the other extreme, and the one in the middle, which I'd say all good chatbots essentially using today, are based on intent recognition. So you might have 100 different intents, and each one of those intents might have a little semi-structure around that. So, you want to catch a plane. Would you like to book a ticket? Okay, here's 3 steps to book that ticket. Or, if you'd actually like to find the best restaurant when you get there, then, it might ask a few questions and get you that restaurant. But it's not saying, press 1 to book a flight, press 2 to to find a restaurant.
That is, but that could actually be also a good service.
That's the simplified. That's just a simplified version, I guess, of the more advanced intent recognition chatbots that you have today.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to figure out is that what I saw happening, the lady talking, that was generated beforehand.
Yeah,
it just picks it up from the database.
Has been pre-created, but not every path has been pre-created. Yeah.
No, I understand. And every customer could figure out his own path within all the options. And that's basically the charm and the unpredictability on one hand, but also the charm of it for the customers. If you look at possible use cases you would like to see doing this, do you envision in the future your doctor sending you a link to a digital human?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Could I envisage who sending?
Do you envision your doctor sending you, when you have like results from a blood test or an X-ray, sending you a link to a digital human where it starts talking to you and explaining?
Excellent. Use case that I haven't heard before or thought of before. I think that's a great one because the knowledge base behind that is relatively well understood and predictable. So there's no reason that you couldn't send someone out there. A similar use case that I was thinking of from an organizational perspective is, I've been working lots of major organizational changes, and communication is the critical thing. So either you get the CEO coming out and saying, okay, guys, this is what's happening. 7,000 people are going to be unemployed by the end of today. They're mostly coming from these 3 areas. You'll get an email today, blah, 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 blah. This is the reasons why, et cetera, and then that's basically it. And then people are sort of lost in a chaos of information, of lack of information. And it would be so much nicer to be able to have the CEO basically broadcast, hey, today, we have some major changes. It's going to affect everyone differently. What I'd ask you to do is I've sent you a link. You can have a chat with my digital twin, and I'll answer whichever questions you have. And he might have, 1, 2, 300 questions already pre-answered, as well as specific to the person's case. So it's like, okay, if you're in this department, if your name's on a specific list or whatever, you get this response. And, unfortunately, so it might still be a nicer way of having that conversation, or at least finding out what the next steps are after having that maybe very first conversation, than being, sent, massive documents that are difficult to understand and may not answer your specific questions.
This is actually interesting because if you talk about a change in organization, having those 300 questions would actually force the CEO and his or her team to think properly about what comes next. Because what I see a lot of the times that they do stuff or they put it out there, and then the questions come and they're like, oops, we didn't consider that. So that questioning of what you're saying, is not a bad idea. If this is,
and the beauty is
you
you can also add questions in, so it's still possible. Once you have as you do with any chatbot, and with the sort of back end of a solution like Asia, that you add 30 questions, and then you don't need to go back and ask the CEO to come back again, so that you can record him, and it takes a day or a week to get that all done. You basically, you have the digital twin, you have the approval rights, someone comes in, goes through it all, the CEO himself or his comms director comes in and says, okay, we approve these responses, they get uploaded, and you have your, the 20 critical answers that weren't part of the Q&A can be added, within minutes, as opposed to waiting days or weeks perhaps for an answer.
Would you assume that if you see a CEO doing this, that in a year or 2 years' time, we see CEOs doing their press performance when they explain their yearly results? Because I would imagine then the press can ask questions. It's limited. You can't make any mistakes as a CEO, because basically you have all the FAQs. That would be really interesting. You put in your results in ChatGPT, and then it generates the questions that any
you could do it.
ask.
I think, unfortunately, for many of those, I think the goal is to test the intelligence of the CEO and make sure that he has the answer and is capable of responding. So it may not tick that box, but for broader questions and answers about an organization, so you go to their website, and you want to know more about the company, that they've actually got a really large set of Q&A about that, or even about the last year's results, that can be presented by somebody such as the CEO about their organization. So, you can go in and speak to Siemens or whatever and say, okay, so what happened last year with cash flow? And then, he'll have he might have a response for that. It would be more like a conversation.
I think that wouldn't be bad, because these people have difficult schedules, and you would have a meaningful conversation with the CEO, but he can't make any mistakes saying things he shouldn't say.
Absolutely.
Or doesn't want to say. So actually, it could be the new world. But then I would imagine journalists would do the same thing, just create a bot that
so you're sending your
asks
bot to have a
questions.
chat with the bot. Yeah.
There's discussion about it, and already testing if you could have one chatbot talking to the other one. That would be an interesting, basically having an AI-driven chatbot talking to an AI-driven chatbot. What would happen? Nobody knows. It becomes totally unpredictable.
I've seen one or two examples of attempts at making that happen. The conversations don't typically go very far, or not particularly exciting yet, but I don't think that's going to take long.
I agree, but the healthcare thing I just put out there. So you see that happening. Would you imagine that doctors would be happy with that?
So my first response is actually yes, but not for the same reasons that maybe hospital organization owners would want that. So if you own a hospital, you might want that because you say, hey, I can save some money and we can get more patients through and increase volume, reduce costs, and have a bigger profitability at the end. I think there's always going to be that case everywhere you go. But for me, for healthcare, I think particularly now you hear a lot about there being a lack of support, maybe not always lack of doctors, but lack of people supporting the doctors, lack of nurses. I think there's a lot of burnout and COVID. I'm not exactly sure what drove all of that, but imagine that you could do more with less. And I think for healthcare, it's a do more with less argument. If you have the best doctor in the world and he can see, let's say, 200 patients a week now, or 100 patients a week, wouldn't it be great if he could see twice as many, because he can get rid of all of the boring stuff which doesn't add value in a safe, reliable, and effective way. If, let's say, he's less having to ask less questions at the beginning of a conversation, because a lot of those questions have already been asked, and then he can really do the value add that where you need that human, that deep expertise. I think that would be something that would make the doctors happy. And if they can't do that today because they can't get their hands on enough medical support staff, having a digital support would be a benefit.
I would imagine that I agree, but I also imagine that before you go to the doctor, that you have either a chatbot or a digital human do the triage. So ask questions before you come. So you're better prepared as a doctor. It saves time during the consultation, and the consultation itself becomes more effective and focused. And at the same time, giving some of the results, maybe not all. Would you imagine a digital human telling someone, "Oh, by the way, your test results are out there, and oh, you got cancer"? Would you assume that?
I would hope not. I think when it. No, I think when it comes
you would
to
have
these
a personal touch.
It's the goal of digital humans is not to replace humans. It's there to empower them and enable them. A lot of the time, people don't have the time to do everything. So, if you can get rid of a lot of the routine work, that allows you to focus on where you add the most value. And I think telling someone they have cancer and what they need to think about and how they need to prepare is definitely the value of having a human doctor, and should be appreciated as such.
So the interesting thing is that there is a sort of an emotional or another limit to as do you want what you want a digital human to do or not to do. So you need to have an intelligent layer on the results, on the medical results, in order to decide can this be done by a digital human
I think
or not.
That makes absolute sense.
Because the complex thing is if you have blood works and you have sort of AI behind or logic, some of the results, it might indicate maybe cancer or something else, other disease that is not so nice, but it doesn't have to be. So here's the complex thing. How do you curate that? It could mean it, but it doesn't have to.
I don't think that's actually going to be that difficult, in the sense that every time I get a blood result, you have a green, yellow, orange, red literally next to every element that's on the result. In the simplest way, you basically can say, hey, if there's anything red there, and I'd say, cancer's probably red, and these things, it's definitely something that you want to speak with a human about. So I think that type of artificial intelligence, or it's even more basic than that, is already in existence and just needs to be effectively implemented. Just like good chatbots, great technology is already out there. A lot of it goes to how well is it implemented, and spending that time and effort in implementing it correctly is super valuable. So I'm not even worried about the jobs for conversation designers. As this new tech comes in, they'll maybe be needed for a few less conversational designers, but you might need more people doing other AI related topics in any case.
I think conversation designers are not going to lose their jobs. I do think that AI is going to deal with, and it's already happening, with the intention utterances, because that's where a lot of the frustration of consumers is, that the chatbot doesn't know what I'm saying, so it hasn't been put in there, and that's human work right now. I think if we get that out of the way, then the quality of the chatbots go up, and basically the user experiences go up, and then the conversation designers can move into the more complicated fields, going from a conversation to a transaction. Because I think, as I said before, whether it's selling something or doing administrative stuff or giving information, that's the same thing if you would talk about medical results with a patient. That's a different level. And I think that's also a way for conversation designers to grow.
Maybe just one other thing on that point in terms of, will it be more efficient? I do believe there's going to be efficiencies that are going to happen. And I just saw this great bit of research showing that I think it was about 20% of organizations in the US already are using chatbots, and another 50% or 60% were planning on it. So I see a huge growth in the industry coming out until literally we will find them essentially everywhere, doing not just in every organization, but doing almost every function or supporting every function in the organization. And in order to basically manage the costs of implementing that, I think we're going to see the abilities of, the capabilities of automation to help probably the same number or even larger number of conversation designers be able to deliver the massive increase in demand.
I totally agree. I see it happening now. The demands I get also in the HR field. Basically, a lot of HR departments have so many people answering questions especially of the larger corporations, standardized questions of their staff, and it's just if you calculate what that costs, and if you could standardize the way you answer the questions, and not on an intranet, because apparently people want a real person or a real answer, not the standardized answer on the internet. Chatbots or digital humans are a relatively cheap solution to do that at scale, 24/7. And then you don't have to send an email, auto reply. We will be back to you in 5 days. That doesn't cut it anymore. And that if it's internally, you don't have to be afraid about giving data, making data driven, because it's within the realm of your company, and it's relatively safe as long as you don't give data of another staff member. That's an important thing. That's something to be scared of. If you look at the news, recent news, and look at what you're doing or what's happening in the conversational AI market, what do you see where there's like giant opportunities that are not being grabbed, or stupid things happening with chatbots? That could also be the case. Did you see anything that caught your attention?
So if I look, I think we can't look at the news and not talk about ChatGPT, since it's pretty much the only thing that it's not the only thing, but it takes up so much of the bandwidth. It's the central theme of just about every chatbot related or AI related topic that we're seeing these days. I think one of the big opportunities we're going to get soon is a halfway house between ChatGPT and intent-based technology, so that you have a much more standardized solution in terms of you're always going to know what the response is going to be, but you're either going to be using the ChatGPT to help you create these faster, which I think already exists today. They're very quick in developing those solutions. But also, as you've said, that intent recognition has always been the challenge. And I don't think we're using the knowledge yet of ChatGPT to even improve the AI that are being used in chatbots to fully understand the intent. And I think if we could meld these two technologies together, we would solve the biggest issue that we have, which is having meaningful conversations that, where the understanding is always there. And on the other side, having that trustability, reliability that organizations still want from their communications tools.
And that's also where the ROI starts happening. Because if someone is not happy with the user experience or the answer, they're still going to call. So then you have to double the cost. You have the agent and the
And I think the cost
chatbot
is going to be a major deal as well. We're going to see a huge reduction. I think chatbots are actually relatively cheap. Voice bots start to become a little bit more expensive, but not extremely so in the big scheme of things. If you look at the digital human tech, you're looking at double-digit costs per conversation, which, if you look at the calculation of a human, is about the same. So I don't think we have a cost benefit for existing digital humans that are in the market versus just hiring another person. And I think that's going to change rapidly with the advent of this type of technology as well.
I think we all can't wait for that to happen. And if you look ahead, maybe 10 years, you're a strategist. So if you look ahead 10 years of time, you founded your company probably with that vision in mind. What does our world look like in terms of conversational AI, chatbots, voice bots, human-like bots?
I'd like to answer this in reflection of your previous question, where you were saying, well, who is going to be the typical users? Is it old people because they need the human connection? Is it young people because maybe they're more adaptable? Is it going to be that middle? My assumption is that in 10 years, it's going to be everywhere. It's just going to be an expectation. Just like it took a little while for people to get used to using an iPhone. And, I think it was within about 10 years of the iPhone becoming really popular, everyone's grandmother was on Facebook. I think we're going to see something similar to that, where the way we communicate with our technology is not going to be drop-down menus, and is not going to be typing text in the vast majority of cases. It's going to be generative in the sense that it will kind of know what you're looking for, and it'll be asking you for sort of agreement or, on the assumptions made. In how it should do things or how it should respond. Just like in LinkedIn, if you get a message, it sort of already generates what your response should be. And I think most people appreciate having something like that. I think that's going to be taken to the next level. I think the conversation is going to be more flexible. I don't know if you've heard of Alberth. I'm not sure if I said his name right. He did some research quite a while back where he measured how people understood things that were said, either by the text, the words that were used, either by the voice or by the body language. And it was the 7-38-55 rule, saying 7% was just the words, 38% was just the voice, and 55% was the body language and the facial expression. So, if you're just using text, which vast majority of computer conversations are done, you're losing out on 93% of the potential connection that you're having. And I think that's gonna vastly change. We've seen already, I think a lot of people loved using their Google Home or similar, although apparently the number of people using that, or I don't know, the excitement seems to have gone down since it's come out. It's no longer so novel, but still effective. I think having that natural voice, face, integrated conversation with your AI, or supported by your AI to, some other AI counterpart, is actually going to become much more normal. And I think it would be quite nice and pleasing and easy. I just recently entered an application for a project where they're trying to build the future of your home. How will the future of your home look? And the examples we're having, maybe you have how should a voice bot be for the future of your home? And I was like, no, I mean, I would want to see my counterpart. I would want to have an emotionally connected home. I'd want that counterpart to be able to see me and say, oh, how are you doing? Have you had a bad day today? Can I put on some soft music and orange lighting so that you can relax and curl up in front of the fireplace that I just lit for you? I think having something more like that is where people are probably imagining we could be, certainly within the next 10 years. And I think, a lot of this could start much, much sooner.
So basically, you're saying that TVs, photo frames, digital photo frames, iPads or tablets, and maybe phones as well. They you walk into your home, the TV goes on, and you're being. This was science fiction. What's it called? There was this cartoon, the Ratsons or something, of science fiction, something in space, where this was happening. It was either a voice or a screen talking to you, and it was like a moving sort of person. But that's basically what you're saying. You're coming into your home and saying, hi, how was your day? And then the rest just happens, and it's being controlled. Your house, it's like Google Home, but then through a moving avatar.
I mean, if you take the capabilities of the existing home, you add a face, personality, maybe some emotion AI to that, sentiment analysis, perhaps, all of these things are already in existence to some level. You also have the facial recognition, so you could have your tablet literally at the door when you enter your home. He says hello, you look, it says hello, it recognizes who you are. It's like, okay, hey, how are you doing today? Should I set up the house like you like it? TV, football goes on, whatever. That is actually, it's not science fiction at the first simplest level. And I always say at the simplest level because, you always start with something which you can deliver today. It's already possible. And how far you develop that, will obviously take time and maybe some tech advances as well.
But it's a interesting thought if you start imagining that, and then okay, you don't normally maybe your partner calls, how was your day, you want dinner, etc. And forget the partner, it's tech that's taking care of it for you. So that, except for maybe warming your bed,
but that would be possible as well. I mean, if it's an emotionally connected home,
electric blanket,
it really would be. It really would be possible, and I think it would be nicer to come home and you open the door, and instead of being sort of lost in your own mind, once again going to that sort of flow-like state, you don't just sort of go in, switch lights and whatever. You say, oh, hey, how you doing? Can you set up the lights? Actually, I'd like to hear some blues, please, and turn on the oven so that I can heat up some dinner later on or something.
Yeah, and then you have the new function in Spotify of the DJ function, and it basically knows what you like and starts playing music combined of everything you like. So have your personal... it is happening in all these separate tools. Basically what you're saying is you bring it together in one sort of application, one sort of interface actually, and you could still have all these separate applications. It's actually interesting. I'd love to see it happen, and it would be amazing. You have a chatbot ready to test, right? You thought about a chatbot of testing? Or?
Yeah, I think we had a quick discussion, and we looked at a healthcare chatbot. And these are still quite, I think, new, and I think they've been around for a little bit more, and sort of the drop-down menu and ticking. But I've personally never used one before, but I was super interested because of the work that I'm doing. How relevant could that be? So did you want me to put it up? Okay, let me just quickly open that up and turn that on.
And what we do is we read out loud what we see, so the people on Spotify know what's happening.
Okay.
But I can imagine healthcare could be a huge market for you, because if you think about doctors being really overworked and basically repeating the same message over and over, but to a different patient, that knowledge could be digitized and be reused over and over. So I could imagine that you get like a generic doctor or even your own doctor, where the content is the same and you produce it for 25, 30, or 100 doctors. But still the same content.
Clearly my goal, I'm not a doctor, so my goal would not be to create the content, but really to partner with the experts in the field that can create the best content, whether it's linked to some form of AI or whatnot. But it's really about how do you make that content then come alive? How do you make it more emotionally acceptable to the user, particularly talking about these kinds of topics which are very personal, to build trust? What's the personality that you want, and how do you create that experience that fits?
And that's on the one hand, but on the other hand, understanding what the patient wants. Maybe it doesn't understand. Doesn't expect a lot of empathy, just the facts. Just give me the information, and the empathy should come from a real doctor.
Yeah.
That could also
these things have to be tested.
I don't know. I don't have
A/B tested and all that. Absolutely, but it comes down to designing that experience that you want. But just one additional piece on that, I think once again, you have emotion AI, you have technologies where people are starting to scan faces, and based on the scan, or maybe based on the change of a face over time, they can understand more about is the person healthy, do they have certain issues or lack certain things. is it connected to your telephone where they can actually automatically see how much sport you've been doing, how much movement? You could have the use case with healthcare where you have a doctor that might see someone once a week now, but maybe they come once a month instead and stay longer and do a full checkup. And every week there's just a check-in. And if the check-in goes well with the digital check-in and the responses are good and the face is good and it checks the activity meter and the heart rate and whatever, and says, okay, so I think it ends up being more than just a user interface. There's really the ability to create a platform which brings together all of that required information in a sort of easy no-code way that you can create a much bigger experience than you would just with your standard chatbot type tool.
Yeah, and I would imagine AI and business rules would sit in that platform to decide whether the patient needs to be seen
absolutely
urgently or not so urgently or not, and give that green.
It'd be an exciting piece of research, I think.
I think I would imagine university hospitals or PhD students would be interested in doing this kind of research, because I think it's potential game changers for the capacity problems that we currently have, but they will become worse in the future with an aging population. It's not going to be less; it's going to be more capacity that's demanded. And geriatrics, not one of the fun studies in healthcare, unfortunately. And we're getting more people that needed someone who specialized in old people.
Yep. And we think about the solutions, we're very quickly into one of those high science fiction movies of robots taking care of people and having the conversations with them and taking them out for walks and cleaning them and all that. And maybe not in the next 10 years, but I don't think it's going to be very long.
Some of the stuff will be happening.
Yeah. Did you want me to share it on the screen, or should we just go through it? Okay.
Yes, please. No, sure.
Symptom checker. So I went online and I was looking for some of the, most highly recommended symptom checkers that are out there, and I came across a top 10 list, and I don't know if Healthly was number 1 or 2, but it was certainly on that top 10 list somewhere. So I thought I'd give it a go, and I was actually quite, impressed, and I thought it'd be worth having a discussion and thinking about, how we could either make it better or what could be the future. If this was done by a real human, how would it look?
Okay, and the first question is, what was your assigned sex at birth? We'll use this to make your report more accurate. We appreciate your identifying gender might be different. This is
very
really,
politically correct.
Very actual. What's happening? Yeah, that's it.
So I'm going to go with male.
Politically correct.
Today, at least.
Okay. It's like it looks a bit like a type form type of.
Very
form.
simple sort of text field.
And what year were you born?
And whatnot. Okay.
Yeah. First one is asking one question about you. Okay.
So what symptoms do you have? So should we make up an imaginary ailment? Tell me.
Me. Okay. My left ear is lower than my right ear. I have no idea. But.
And, okay.
For me,
just with that. And it hurts. There we go.
Yeah. Now we're getting it. Sorry, just to check. Are these your symptoms? Please choose all the ones you have. Okay. If something's missing, you can add it. Okay, this is interesting. So it got from, it said pain.
Yep.
And we said it hurts. And from it hurts,
it has
so it recognized an intent.
Yep. In this case, only one. Let's add more symptoms.
So, well, let me read it. Hold on. Oh, you're going to first. No, it's okay. You can't go back. This time start typing and we'll make suggestions. Can't see your symptoms, skip this step.
Okay.
We'll ask for more details later.
I wanted to add
if
earache
it's relevant.
because I think pain was too generic for a sore ear. So we got that.
Okay, earache. But can't see your symptoms. We can see our symptoms because the left ear is lower than the right ear.
Lower than right ear. Okay. Nope. Not what we wanted. Okay.
So So it's not something
exists, so it's probably fair that it's not a symptom.
Happens. Add these symptoms. So add the symptom. We just screwed up their database.
Okay. So
what does it say? I picked up the following symptom, pain. I'd like to make sure I understand what that means. Please choose the options that best describe the symptom. You can choose more than one. So now it's trying to determine what kind of pain we have. So bone pain or something?
Head or neck.
Pain, head or neck. Okay. Could it be more than one?
Yep.
Okay. Submit. So then it says, please choose any of the options below that apply to the symptom, pain in head or neck. You can you can choose more than one. So now it's diving deeper into the...
Is if it sort of takes you down a path, but it keeps you going down that path until it sort of feels like it's satisfied that, it's really understood that well. And I think it's not like a typical tree-like structure. It seems to have something behind it that pulls out these potential elements.
So we said pain in or behind the ear.
I think let's go with that. Okay.
Please choose any of the options below that apply to the symptom. Pain in or behind the ear. You can choose more than one. Pain behind the ear pain or pressure. Submit. We chose ear pain and pressure. Please choose any of the options below that apply to the symptom. Pain in collarbone, shoulder, armpit, arm, or hand. You can choose more than one. Collarbone pain, pain in shoulder, pain under armpits. Okay, let's choose pain under armpits. It's getting really confused now. It's probably,
there we go.
These are two different things. So I can't find any matching conditions for the symptoms you've told us. However, there are some articles that might interest you. Okay, now I'm confused. I would have imagined it would say, we haven't found it doesn't mean it's not real. Go see the doctor or something like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting. So what I think the information it gives is good. It doesn't have enough information, so it keeps it general. But rather than saying, hey, if you believe this is something serious, or if you feel this is serious, then make sure you go see a doctor. It could be for legal reasons they don't do that. They're just staying out of that assessment altogether. They're saying, we're not going to tell you to see a doctor. That's your job. We're just giving you information.
But then what's the point of this solution? What does it do? It's basically a Google on steroids.
Maybe makes it quicker to do your own research. If you are someone that, like myself, I'd always do the research before I went to a doctor anyway. So I would want to make sure that I have the best understanding. And then at least I can ask the right questions. So it certainly would help for that. It's not yet designed to replace the doctor in any way, in that sense of saying, okay, now you have to go to the doctor, you shouldn't go to you should be able to treat this at home, etc. I think I read an article just recently where they were comparing some of these chatbots in terms of how effective they were. You might have mentioned that one earlier as well. And
yeah, this was one of them, not Healthfully itself, but and that they were on the lower end of getting it right, because it's sort of stuck in what it can do, and it doesn't make any connections, because these are two different symptoms, and it didn't make any connection, or it doesn't look, or it seems as if it's not combining these two.
Yeah, it doesn't have the capability to basically make connections between all symptoms and work out what would be, let's say, the one or two ailments that would impact both. Where if you have an infection, you also know you might have, I'm not a doctor, but you could imagine that you'd have, let's say, pain under the armpits because you have swollen glands because you're fighting an infection at the same time, which could be an ear infection, and you should probably go to the doctor.
Well, that's exactly. So that's why I'm a bit surprised that it's actually, although it's well done, it's actually quite simplistic, and I'm not sure if it does right by the patient and if it actually helps you. Because if you have something undefined, or I would assume it does something the other way around, that it says, okay, I have these symptoms. It could be X, Y, or Z, and then ask relevant questions as to determine, maybe you forgot something that, I don't know, in a certain condition, I don't know, you have pain in your elbow because of it. And then it says, oh, by the way, do you have pain in your elbow? And he says, oh, yeah, I forgot. I thought it was from playing tennis, but yes, I have pain in my elbow. Oh, interesting. Then it could be this or that. And then it can take different paths. And this is sort of stuck in a certain path. But it all depends on what the purpose is of the app or the application. If it's to help you figure out what you have, then I'm not
Sufficient,
sure if it's it's a bit helpful. It's for the simple stuff. It might be helpful for the ear infection, the singular problems. But for if you have multiple things or multiple symptoms, it might be more difficult to get the right thing out.
And how did ChatGPT go in that same assessment?
Interestingly enough, I tried it with. I had recent blood works. I tried it, and it's not half bad. It's actually quite good. However, you need to understand how to ask the questions. So, what prompts to use, in what order to get to relevant information. And I think that's what's missing here. It's a very technical approach to drilling down in the information.
Yep.
It's not very dynamic. And it can't make any logical or illogical connections. Whereas, hey, this blood result, in this type of thing, could also happens in that. Oh, interesting. Although it's very rare, it could be the case. So I think ChatGPT and models like that could inspire doctors to think of stuff they would never think of because it's hidden somewhere deep down in literature or articles, and probably find stuff they wouldn't find maybe only in the later stage where it's really, really serious. And it shows itself. So I'm, how should I say it? Depending on the way they, because do you know how they sold it or are selling it? Is it
This was free. So this is an
paid
open free
application?
access. I just clicked on their website and was able to use the symptom checker.
But do they have an app out there for doctors?
That I can't say.
You know, I'll research it myself. We'll tag them in there and see what it is. But I think if you're a patient, you need to be careful. I'm not a doctor. I don't give any medical advice, but I think you should be careful using this because it's a too simplistic way of showing things, especially if you might have something complicated. If it's something simple, that's probably fine. But if not, then would you use this for yourself?
I think I would for informational purposes, but I would probably use multiple things. I've also used ChatGPT before. It was surprisingly good with ChatGPT. I found that I was able to sort of get relatively clear guidelines, and of course, you should see a doctor, but don't believe that we have medical expertise. So they basically put those guide rails in there already in the simplest way. But they do say, for example, okay, this can be a grave thing. You should see a doctor or whatnot. But I think as we get closer to having that good information, we might actually get into a very uncomfortable position where it is at least as good as your typical doctor, and doctors will have to use it in order to be better than, seeing your chatbot for advice.
That's exactly the way I see it. I think doctors will become better doctors because of the technology and the AI. And actually, in the end, I think healthcare is going to be, well, not necessarily cheaper, but we will lower the cost per patient because we I hope at least doctors will be able to find stuff in an earlier stage or get inspired by possible options. At the other hand, my worry is that people like you and me are going to do this, and we say, hey, ChatGPT, give me 5 differential diagnoses for this blood result. Then it comes up with a few things that are not so grave, and then a few things that might be grave. And then we go to the doctor saying, hey, we found this, ChatGPT said that, and we have the articles to prove it. And so could you please make sure I don't have that? Then we don't, but people will get stressed because the AI says you might have something grave. So I think at first the doctors will be sort of forced by the situation, by the patients, to do extra testing in order to exclude things that don't make any sense or not logical, in order to have the patient sleep again. But I think the stage after that will be that it'll actually be something that is shared between doctor and patient, where they both will use. That's what I mean with a curated version, something that is sort of curated in a way by the medical field, where patients are free to use it and to look up whatever they want, get inspired by stuff, maybe complaints they didn't think of mentioning to the ENT doctor or to the internal medicine specialist because they don't think it's relevant. But the AI could ask them that and say, but it is relevant because we need the full picture. And then I think it will lead eventually to a more holistic approach of medicine where for years and years now we've been compartmentalizing healthcare. You're either internal medicine and within that you have subspecialisms or you go to a lung doctor or a cardiologist, and it's all separate fields and they need to discuss a lot together in order to bring stuff together. But I think AI can take over a lot of that and make things more the healthcare more concise and faster. And hopefully if we find stuff earlier, eventually we start treating earlier, healthcare goes into preventive medicine instead of curative medicine. And that probably increases the survivability of people and lowers eventually the cost of healthcare in general. However, people will get older then, so we have a new problem. So I'm not sure if everybody will be happy then, but that's my vision. At least on,
and there's one additional piece is, a lot of people don't go to doctors today. Either they don't trust them, they can't afford them. And it's one thing to say, oh no, you should go to a doctor because a doctor is still better than one of these sort of symptom checkers or doing the research yourself. And, it's probably true in most cases. But what about when people just don't go to and I think there's a lot of people that don't go lots of the time to doctors for all kinds of reasons, economic or preference or privacy, and might be more open to doing that digitally, which means that even though there might be some error where it doesn't tell you that you have something bad when it should do, and you maybe don't go to the doctor quick enough, there'll also be many, many, many cases where people would never have gone to the doctor at all, but because they trusted or felt comfortable in their own home to do this test themselves, they're actually saying, oh, I better go to the doctor because according to this, I've got a 1 in 3 chance of having, a major disease that I wouldn't have ever thought about, and actually taking and going to the doctor then.
So basically what you're saying is it helps democratizing healthcare. Making it accessible. There's one other thing that I just realized, that if you put in place applications like you are doing, illiterate people could be helped in that same process of democratizing healthcare, because for them probably hard to type and read. So what if the person, the digital person, would ask you, you have pain in your arm, or and go through it that way.
Yep.
That might also help.
People are blind or have hard at seeing, elderly people, dyslexia, or any other common complaints.
Or people with rheumatism or something like that, or arthritis who have a hard time typing. I agree. So it's more than democratizing healthcare. It just makes life easier. So basically we should urge all hospitals and doctors to start using this.
Could be improved a lot, and then the more it's used, and you have the learning feedback cycle. Yeah, it'd be the
better it gets. And Stephan, if you would be able to give an organization that's at the cross point of we are thinking of introducing a chatbot or a voice bot or a human-like bot, like what you are building. What would you advise, on the one hand, the team that is working with it? Okay, we need to develop this, and the board of the company. What would your advice be to them on how to view the start of this, and in order to make it successful, how to approach a project like that?
Okay, it's a big question.
Difficult questions. I realize that.
There's probably two elements that are always challenging in any kind of project like this. One is be really clear on what the goal is, and how to measure that goal, and what does success mean, and what is the scope. Scope creep is just always a challenge, I think. So really define, step one, we're going to create this scope, this capability, and we want to have this emotional outcome or this outcome when people use our bot. And the second one, I think, is just spend that time on the preparation of, what's the personality that we want to have, what's that connection, what kind of automations are critical, just really what's the look and the feel, and spending that time in the preparation piece, so that when it comes to then building it up, you can actually build something which is sort of relatively solid, on first go, and then you can rapidly improve it by cycling through different rounds of improvements and feedback.
And what would you say to the CEO of a company that is going to introduce something like this or start a project like this? How much patience should they have, and how much stretch in their budget should they give?
How long is a piece of string? That's where I think those first 2 points really come in. If you have a really set scope and really clear definition of success, you can really quite rapidly, I'm talking, potentially weeks in the near future, certainly months in sort of 1 to 3 months, you can really come up with something that works really well and even has a certain level of complexity and capability and automation. To get an MVP out, and then to get that out and test it, and not to try and make it all singing, all dancing for every single use case. And then when it comes to what to focus on, I think it certainly depends whether you're sort of on a text, voice, or digital human side. Speaking from where I've been focusing my time, I think that for the digital human, you really want to focus on where does automation create lots of value, and where does having an emotional connection, sharing your brand, sharing your values, have a really important impact. And then when you can get where those two overlap is really the type of use cases you want to kick off first.
I'm really curious where this is going. I want to thank you, Stephan, for being on the show and sharing your insights with us and knowledge. And I'm looking forward to seeing the digital humans out there. And in the coming months, I'll probably be doing some specials on healthcare and AI, and conversational AI. So I'll present this as a possibility, see how they respond, and maybe some researcher picks it up and says, "Hey, I'll call Stephan and
awesome.
see
Absolutely.
what we can do with this."
Exciting stuff, and thank you for letting me join.
Yeah, thank you, and good luck with the launch. By the time this airs, you have already launched, if all goes well. So we'll keep following you and see where this goes. And maybe someday my role is taken over by a digital human. Who knows?
I think you've got enough time. I think we're good. Mine too, by the way. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.